Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I am the Omni Viewer, and it's time to finally put this matter to bed. Today, I will finally share my thoughts on how Godzilla 2014 compares to Shin Godzilla. I suppose my stance is actually easy to guess. Given the choice between the two, I prefer the legendary film. But if you think I'm going to spend the whole video elevating it on a pedestal, you're about to be thrown a curveball. You see, ever since I lifted my self-imposed review embargo, I've noticed something. The reasons that people love or hate each movie are exactly the same. I'm serious, folks. I've heard so many of the same praises and criticisms go both ways that if you took quotes out of context, you'd swear Godzilla 2014 and Shin Godzilla were two different titles for the same film. Not enough screen time for Godzilla? Check. Too many changes making it an unfaithful adaptation? Check. Issues with plotting? Check. Disliking the cinematography? Check. Heck, even the respective designs for the eponymous kaiju line up with surprising consistency. Both kaiju can be described as fat. Both kaiju have beady little eyes and disproportionately tiny arms. Both kaiju have feet that make no anatomical sense for the bodies they're supporting. Both kaiju have gills. Gills, for heaven's sake! Such a big deal has been made about Godzilla having gills, yet which one they look better on depends on which movie you prefer. Ultimately, this has only made the divide between Shin fans and Legendary fans even wider, and the tension between the two camps is palpable. Terms like hypocrite have been thrown around quite a bit in this debate, and that's one of the kinder terms. I am not here to perpetuate that pettiness. If anything, I'd like to strongly encourage both sides to knock it off, because it's really not solving anything. I don't care who started it, I don't care who's the worst offender, it just needs to end, because there's no reason to keep it going. Why can't everyone just accept that people like different things, and we can all go and enjoy whatever movie we like? I strongly disagree with everyone who thinks Shin Godzilla is the greatest G movie ever, but at the end of the day, we can all agree that Godzilla's Revenge is the real bottom of the barrel. In time, the two camps will settle their differences, of that I'm sure, but I think we'd all prefer that happen sooner rather than later. Lest you think any of this preamble has been a gigantic cop-out, though, rest assured, it's not. I sit squarely in Legendary's camp, and the rest of this video will be me explaining why I prefer the Legendary film to the Toho film. I just felt like all that stuff really needed to be said. Everything I'm about to say henceforth, therefore, is just related to the movie. If you're a fan of Shin Godzilla, please do not take this personally, okay? So if the two movies share so many of the same critiques, what is it that tips the scales in 2014's favor? For me, it's the characters. I find that good characters can really make or break a story. You can weave the most intricate plot ever with shocking twists, biting commentary, and thrilling action, but if the characters are just one-note cardboard cutouts, nobody's going to care. Now yes, ideally a work of fiction should have good characters and good plotting, but if forced to pick one or the other, I'll take characters over plot any day. Characters are the reason why we invest ourselves in fiction. In fact, some of the greatest works out there emphasize character over plot. For example, Ghostbusters... No, the original Ghostbusters. That's better. Ghostbusters doesn't really focus on its plot until the last third of the movie. For the first two-thirds, it's just the wacky hijinks of fun characters encountering the paranormal. Similar statements can be made for Men in Black and Iron Man. Spice and Wolf should be the most boring anime series ever, seeing as how every plot point hinges on economic systems that went extinct during the Enlightenment. But our two leads have such great chemistry that it's become somewhat of a phenomenon in otaku culture. The Hobbit is literally just about Bilbo Baggins walking from one place to another and all the stuff that happens on the way. Yet because Bilbo and the people around him are so well realized, it's considered a fantasy classic. Waiting for Godot is a two-scene play about a couple of tramps biding their time waiting for the plot to begin, yet what they do as they wait is endlessly entertaining. Characters mean a lot to me, and Godzilla 2014 has better characters than Shin Godzilla. To demonstrate why I believe this, I'm going to compare those characters, starting with our two human leads, and I'll go entirely on what's in the movies, no external source material, no fan theories or anything. This is just what I can derive from the movies as is.
So let's look at Ford Brody first.
I know, nobody likes Ford. But here's the thing. Every negative thing I've ever heard said about Ford always comes back around to Aaron Taylor Johnson's understated performance. I have yet to hear anyone say something bad about the way Ford is written, because Ford is written expertly.
Here's everything we know about Ford. As a child, his family was hit by an unexplained tragedy which drove a wedge between himself and his father, Joe Brody. As an adult, he became a soldier, which indicates that he was looking for some form of stability in his life which was not being provided. He is happily married with a son, and he loves his new family very much.
He also has an impressive level of maturity, supporting my previous statements that Ford is meant to be the anti-Sam Witwicky.
Even though his relationship with Joe is strained, he still goes to Japan to bail him out of prison, and has a deep understanding for where the man is coming from. Once the plot kicks into high gear, he spends the entire film attempting to get back to his family. Not only is he that devoted to them, but he doesn't want the Mutos to tear his family apart the way they did in his youth. Since he is a soldier, though, he has a strong sense of duty, and therefore doesn't hesitate to offer his services in the face of the ultimate crisis, or even just look out for a lost child. He is, however, flawed. He is not exceptionally skilled above anyone else, and he is prone to making rash decisions that don't quite work out to everyone's benefit. We don't know how he met his wife Ellie, but we know they love each other deeply.
That just about covers it for Ford. Now let's look at Rando Yaguchi from Shin Godzilla.
We know he works for the Japanese government, and he's deeply embroiled in his job. He admits to liking politics because he finds it simple and straightforward.
Really? Well, okay, whatever you say, man.
He also is so devoted to his job and the task of defeating Godzilla that he lets everything else fall to the wayside, including his own hygiene. He's not interested in becoming the Prime Minister just yet, but maybe in a few years. And that's it, really. He presumably is not married, but does he have a life outside of work? Does he have family like parents, siblings, cousins, or even a pet goldfish? He's the only one at the beginning who takes the reports of a sea monster seriously, but why? Does he study cryptozoology? Did he have an encounter with a sea monster as a child? Does he think the sea monster reports might be something else entirely? He says a prayer in front of the wreckage after the first attack. Is he religious? If so, what religion? Shinto? Buddhist? Christian? If he's not religious, then why did he pray? What got him into politics in the first place? What's the reason he's so single-mindedly devoted to his job above everything else?
Do you see the difference? I made a lot of statements about Ford. He's a character we know and understand. But I asked a lot of questions about Yaguchi, because we don't really know him. We never see him in any circumstance outside of the crisis, so he's not really relatable. And I can extend this to other characters as well. How about we go next to the two characters who don't make it to the credits?
Joe Brody starts out with a happy life. He loves his wife deeply and is very affectionate with her. He loves Ford too, but his tendency to obsess over work can distract him, which he feels bad about. When disaster kills his wife and drives him from his home, he takes it hard. Rather than seek stability the way Ford did with the army, Joe's brokenness leads to obsession, a desire to understand why his life was ruined. Sadly, this becomes the new distraction that keeps him from Ford, and even though he still loves his son, he cannot pull himself away. Though he is able to reconnect with Ford and have his search for reason vindicated, he is tragically killed by the very thing he sought.
Joe's death strikes a chord with us because he is sympathetic. We get to see how happy his life was before the Mutos showed up, and then we see that happiness ripped violently away from him.
He may be different from Ford in how he handles tragedy, but Ford is ultimately his father's son, and one can see how Joe influences Ford's actions throughout the film.
Compare that to Shin Godzilla's Prime Minister, or PM as he's more commonly called.
He seems like a nice, well-meaning guy, but when faced with this unprecedented crisis of a kaiju attack, he just keeps making mistakes one right after the other, many of them costing people's lives and others leading to greater catastrophe further down the road. Clearly, the impression we are meant to get is that this guy really sucks at his job and the nation would be better off without him. In fact, I'd say that was exactly the intention, since the situation only improves after the PM and the rest of the old guard are out of the picture.
The PM is a straw man, a one-note caricature meant to represent the quote-unquote other side with no redeeming qualities to him at all.
This actually highlights an issue that extends to the whole cast, because we only ever see any of them in the midst of the crisis that is Godzilla's attack. We don't really know how the PM functions under normal circumstances, or what the public thinks of him. He could be a great, well-liked leader most of the time, and his incompetency could simply stem from being overwhelmed by something which has no precedent, but the movie never gives us any evidence that this is so. All we ever see is a bumbling fool who couldn't find his own butt with 2 hands and a flashlight, and whose errors lead to catastrophe. Ergo, while Joe Brody's death affects us, the PM's death does not. We are in fact encouraged to see his death as ultimately beneficial to Japan. And that's kind of messed up.
Even the side characters can be compared in this way.
Doctors Ishiro Serizawa and Vivian Graham may not get the most on-screen development, but we clearly understand them. They are scientific rebels because they hunt monsters, and they have a nuanced understanding of those monsters. They straddle the line between the scientific and the religious, viewing Godzilla as both a natural phenomenon and a living god.
We even get a glimpse of where Serizawa's beliefs might stem from when we learn the origins of that watch he carries around.
It stopped.
Yes, 8:15 in the morning, August 6, 1945.
Hiroshima.
It was my father's.
Meanwhile, we know the people gathered by Yakuchi to figure out Godzilla are rebels and outcasts because, we're told they are. This guy has a pink towel wrapped around his neck, which is kind of mildly quirky, but beyond that, we're shown nothing to support the idea that these are the outcasts of the system, other than simply being told they are. So that's breaking the golden rule of filmmaking right there. You know, show, don't tell.
And don't think for a second I've forgotten our 2 respective Godzillas. Oh yes, the characterization issue applies even to them.
Legendary Godzilla, despite what I've heard some say, does have a personality, and truly feels like a living, thinking creature.
This is especially well showcased in the sequence where he kills Hakumuto. Observe.
He watches Hakumuto circling around and gets a sense of where he's going and what he'll do. As Hakumuto closes in, Godzilla feigns ignorance, and at just the right moment, wham! A well-placed strike crushes Hakumuto like the bug he is.
This sequence, done entirely without dialogue or operatic arias with expository lyrics, tells me that Godzilla is a thinking creature, able to come up with plans on the fly and make use of his surroundings. But we're not done yet.
Once Hakumuto is dispatched, Godzilla pauses to catch his breath.
This tells me that even though Godzilla is powerful, he's not omnipotent. He's not done with his job yet, but he still needs a moment to catch his breath, creating just the right sense of vulnerability that any good hero should have. But we're still not done.
As he's catching his breath, Godzilla notices the building is about to fall onto him, and you can tell from his body language that he's thinking, "Oh, you've got to be kidding me." Legendary Godzilla's personality is clear. He's a monster on a mission. He's not leaving until it's done, and he knows how to win when the opportunity presents itself. But he also feels the weight of having to do this all by himself.
And now back to Shin Godzilla. I've had people tell me that the reason Shin Godzilla lacks a personality is because he's meant to represent a natural disaster, which I get, but that completely misses the point of Godzilla.
Godzilla represented a bomb in the original film, and he still had a personality. A personality is what makes Godzilla distinct, and without it, you may as well just make a regular disaster movie.
As I've said, Shin Godzilla really doesn't have a personality at all, and this is best exemplified in the scene where he first learns how to stand upright.
After struggling to get on his feet, he succeeds in becoming perpendicular to the ground.
So what does he do then? Does he experiment with his newfound mobility?
Nope, he just stands there as all the drama with the helicopters happens. He doesn't move, he doesn't look at the strange things in front of him, he doesn't wobble for balance, heck, his tail doesn't even sway. He just stands there, stock still, his large dead fish eyes staring at nothing, as though he has no perception of the world around him at all, and he doesn't move again until the helicopter sequence is over and it's his turn to do something.
To me, this feels like Anno and Higuchi were so focused on everything happening around Godzilla that they forgot to give Godzilla anything to do. That's a problem. I am an actor, and I have been in both the foreground and background of many different productions. Let me tell you folks, the worst thing an actor in the background can do is freeze. The actor has to be doing something, or else it breaks the illusion.
And what about his motivations? Legendary Godzilla comes ashore because he's hunting the Mutos. But why does Shin Godzilla come ashore?
If he were just a storm, it wouldn't matter. But he's a living creature, and no living creature does something without a reason.
You might say it's because he's evolving, but that would be technically inaccurate. What Godzilla goes through is more akin to metamorphosis, like a tadpole becoming a frog, but there's no evidence that this is part of his natural life cycle. Then again, the movie says it is evolution, so forget the semantics. If it's evolution, what triggers it?
Evolution doesn't just happen. It needs a trigger, something that deliberately spurs the development of a new trait to ensure the survival of the species. So again I ask, what is it that triggers Shin Godzilla to evolve in such a way that necessitates him coming on land?
Perhaps it's to find a new food source, maybe a nuclear reactor, but he never attacks a reactor in the film and appears to generate and replenish energy all on his own, so that's out. Most incarnations of Godzilla come ashore because they were attacked first, but not a single shot is fired at Shin until halfway through the movie, so that's not it either. Shin is the only monster in the movie, so he's not hunting or acting territorial.
In the end, the only explanation left is that Godzilla comes ashore because if he doesn't, there's no conflict. So basically, Shin Godzilla is an age-old joke about giant monster movies that doesn't realize it's a joke, all because the eponymous monster has no personality or motivation.
So there you have it. Above all the other things I've said, what draws me most to Godzilla 2014 and repels me most from Shin Godzilla is how the latter falters in the characterization department.
You know what the ironic thing is, though? I didn't expect bad character writing to be an issue for Hideaki Anno. In fact, he's one of the last people I expect it from.
I'm not a fan of Anno when it comes to his storytelling. I find his plots are either too simple or so convoluted that he loses control of them far too easily. When it comes to characters, though, he excels. I can't say Neon Genesis Evangelion's story works, given all the plot holes and dangling threads, but I fully understand why Shinji, Misato, Rei, and Asuka are as messed up as they are. Gunbuster didn't exactly have a groundbreaking story, but I cared about Noriko and her journey.
Anno is good at writing well-rounded, compelling characters. So what in the blue blazes happened here?
Did he choke under the pressure of making a Godzilla movie? Did he write a script for a 6-hour film and made cuts in all the wrong places? Did he just have an off day?
I think I know what might have happened. It's speculation, but I think it's likely. Does anything about the way Shin Godzilla begins feel familiar? The way we're just thrust headlong into the midst of a story without any time to adjust or know what we're dealing with or who the characters are? Yeah, that's exactly the way Neon Genesis Evangelion begins.
Actually, a lot of anime and manga stories start this way, just dropping the audience into the middle of a story already in progress, then telling us what's going on as the series continues. As jarring as it can occasionally be, it's not a bad way to start a series.
Shin Godzilla, however, is not a series. It's a movie. As such, opening in media res the way a series would doesn't work.
If this were a series, we might have gotten episodes that flesh out the characters, but such moments never come in the movie, or if they do, they come far too late to matter. Movies need to be handled differently than series. Godzilla 2014 does it better, showing us what the characters' lives were like before they were upended, and putting them in situations that allow us to see beyond the surface, even if only for a moment. Shin Godzilla does not. Ergo, this is the ultimate reason why, in this instance, I prefer the American Godzilla movie to the Japanese one.
There we go. Comparison complete. And you know what? I think I'm done talking about Shin Godzilla for now.
I've honestly said everything I want to, and I don't want this channel to be just about how much I don't like this one movie. So now that I've fulfilled my promise to compare it to the 2014 film, this is it. I won't be one of those people who continues bashing Shin Godzilla because I know it'll get you riled up. This is one I'm ready to put behind me.
I may bring it up again depending on the circumstance, like if a sequel is ever announced, but for now I say we move on to other topics. But most important of all is this. Whether you agree with me or not, thank you for at least taking the time to hear me out. Until such time as we meet again, this is the Omni Viewer, signing off. Oh, and just to reiterate, seriously, enough with the infighting. We are all Godzilla fans. We may like slightly different movies in this regard, but it's really not hurting anyone. So please, just let it go.